Any advice given in this episode is for educational purposes only and not to be used as legal advice. Welcome to Wayward Writers. I'm Heather Cashman.
I'm Stephanie Beers.
And I'm Nikki Jacobsmeyer.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode. This is going to be a special episode about if you get a book deal, but you don't have an agent, what do you do now? And the reason we decided to do this episode is because I noticed some conversations on Twitter about this topic, and I felt like it barely scratched the surface of what you really need to know if you are querying both publishers and agents at the same time. Nikki and Stephanie, as authors, do you want to start us off?
You bet. So this is like a nightmare, daydream, happiness all rolled into one, isn't it? I mean,
yes,
like,
it's a great problem. If you're going to call it that, right?
It's a fantastic problem to have. You're looking for an agent, you're looking for a publisher, and you get someone interested. So now what do you do? Do you take that offer and parlay it into trying to get an agent who would be interested in repping you? Is that the way you go? Or do you go ahead and try and negotiate this out yourself? Which is better? What do you guys think?
Yep. Well, first, I hope that you took a minute or, 60 to celebrate the fact that you queried an agent or an editor, for that matter, that you finished and polished a manuscript. That is huge. So we definitely do that. So if you haven't, after you listen to this, go do that. but that's important. We have to keep celebrating all of our wins, yes, big or small.
Get your Dr. Pepper out and go.
Yes, absolutely. Whatever it is that you do. First, it would be good. We're going to just kind of go through and explain what each scenario would look like in general, what it would look like for both. And then we can chat about what are some pros and cons and, this now what, right? Which a lot of times comes down to game plan. So right now, if you're thinking, oh, I'm not querying, I haven't queried yet, I'm not in this situation, it is very possible that you will be in this situation. And so it's great to always have a game plan beforehand because it feels like we can have some control and confidence in that in this industry that is very much all changing all the time.
Maybe Heather can give us an idea about what's it look like when you get a contract and you're on your own, you don't have an agent. What's an immediate do or don't? Do I say, okay, sign it? Or what? I mean, what do I do?
Yeah, so I think, like you guys said, game plan is key because number one, what you're going to do is you're going to be very emotional. It's very exciting to get a book deal, especially if you've been working on it for years and years. You finally reach the stage where you're finally getting somewhere. And I think a lot of times what happens is that our emotions take over and we often can become very, very vulnerable to making big mistakes. And this is the exact time that you don't want to make mistakes. So having a plan in the beginning is key, and knowing what you want to do next. And there are two basic scenarios. One is with an agent and one is without an agent. So the minute you get that book deal, it's going to come to you through most likely an email from the editor who is going to offer to you. And the offer can come or the contract can come. A lot of times with small publishers, they just send the contract straight out. But sometimes they can also send the offer, which is usually in a memo with their letterhead, or it's just pasted in the body of the email. So, and when I say you get an offer, what that means is that you have gotten an offer to be published. And that will come with the major deal points. Those deal points often include your advance, if there is one, your royalties, your royalty escalators, the territory rights that they're asking for. Often it can include subsidiary rights that they're asking to retain. And so there's a lot of things that can come in the offer. And The main thing you want to do is not agree to anything.
Okay.
Do not agree to anything. You want to just email them back. You can share your excitement. Try not to use too many exclamation points. And make sure that you um, just say, thank you so much for the offer. I'm very excited about this. I look forward to the prospect of working with you, because you don't want to say, I look forward to working with you, because then you've accepted something. See? So you have to be very careful in your language, because you don't know for sure if you want to accept this deal until you've calmed down a little bit and you're not quite so emotional and you can think rationally about what the offer really is giving you.
Yeah, and this is before, right? You are even deciding if you want to pursue querying an agent. This is just in
Exactly.
general, right? Because, yes,
Yes.
it's so hard.
It's always good. It's always good to take some time and just let your emotions run through, do your celebration, do your dance, do whatever it is you do, and take some time, sleep on it, and then you can decide,
I
make
think
some
that's
decisions.
really important information, because I think there are tendency as authors, when somebody's like, there's you can get a possibility of being published, that's all I hear, and then I'm like, yes, yes, of course, yes. And I know, just hearing you say all those words like subsidiary rights, and I'm like, oh, all those things I don't know. And I've had a lot of books published, and it still scares me when I see all those things. So, as the author, I can see where people are like, okay, I need to go get an agent, or how do I even read this contract? So, if you're not going to pursue an agent with it, getting a lawyer, getting help, what do you recommend?
Yeah, so the very first thing I would do if I was going to proceed without an agent, is I would find somebody who is going to check you, like your critique partner, your whoever. Because one of the main things that I do for my clients is I'm kind of the barrier between them just signing anything because they're really wanting this deal, and helping them think rationally about what is really included in this deal. So I would say get somebody you really trust, hopefully somebody who has had this experience before, who can help you think rationally about the deal. The second thing I would do is I would get a lawyer. If I were going to not get an agent, and that's totally valid, then you need to at least get somebody who knows all of this legalese language, who's going to be able to help you really understand what it is that they're asking for, and you are signing on the dotted line. So you're going to be responsible. And you don't just want any lawyer. You need to get a lawyer who has worked with publishing contracts before. Because most lawyers, and I have talked to several over the course of my agenting career, they've been husbands of clients or they've been fathers of clients who have looked over their contracts, and they don't understand the language of publishing contracts or what is actually being asked for. And so it's definitely important that if you do go get a lawyer, that the person knows publishing.
Yeah, and I think some houses, depending on where you're publishing, have what's called a boilerplate contract, and so that does not mean you cannot ask questions, and that does not mean that they will not change the language. Okay, but that just means that know that the parameters have been set in a way that you're most likely not gonna, a percent isn't necessarily gonna change, or an advance or something like that, as an author representing yourself. And I know the first time I got a book contract and I didn't have an agent, my cousin is a lawyer. And so he did look at it for me. And it took a long time, and I went back with my questions, and a lot of them were answered and it was fine. And it was like, well, this is a boilerplate contract. It's not certain things aren't going to change. And then I had to decide, what I was good with. And I was good with it. And I moved on. This last contract, though, after having an agent and now being unagented after, we parted, I read through the contract and I knew more now. And there was certain things that I was like, no, I don't think I want this, because my intention is to query in the near future. And I called Stephanie and I was like, right, I want them to strike this sentence that says they have rights to my next deal. I don't want that. I don't want to have to send them whatever it is, and the response was something like, well, it doesn't have to be this. And I was like, I understand, but I need it struck from the contract, because I don't want down the road, if another agent picks me up, I don't want them to have to deal with that. Like, there's certain things that you have to think about. And if you don't know, ask someone that has that experience. And that's what I did with Stephanie. I was like, I just need you to check me, like, is this right? Because this is what I'm thinking, but I don't have an agent to go here. You know what I mean? Take care of this for me, which is a lovely thing. Yes, you pay them, but it's worth worth the money.
And
that's personal choice, right? But
and it is sort of personal choice, because let's face reality, we have to get an agent who wants us. And
correct.
So that comes to the next part of the question. If I'm looking at this contract and I'm like, oh my gosh, I need an agent, is this a good time if I, to take it, as I've got a possible contract here? Would an agent be more interested in repping me now that I already have something than they might have been if I, am just submitting a prospective manuscript? And if that's true, how do I deal with that if I want to? I love having an agent, because there's so much that there's a lot to know. And my agent, who's wonderful, and her name is Heather, goes through and does so much of that legal part that it's mind-boggling, and you have to know so much. So do I take this contract and say, now's my chance? Is that a good thing to do or not?
I think so. I mean, I think that, when I have had people come to me with a contract, of course it's exciting. Like, it's loads of time that I didn't have to use submitting this manuscript and trying to get a deal. And so because of that, yeah, I think that it's a great time to go and leverage that and try and get an agent with your contract. I will say that it will matter where you have the publishing deal. There are publishers that are so small, they won't offer an advance, and their royalties are low, and those kind of things. Maybe they're still traditional, but your advance is $500. When I take 15% of $500, that's not much money. And it takes me many hours to negotiate a contract, many hours over a month or 2 months or 3 months. I'm working for less than minimum wage for your contract. But if it's with a publisher who's larger, like Berkley has open sub days. Delacorte Random House always is open to unagented submissions. Harlequin always open to unagented submissions. I think they might have windows now. But there are a lot of traditional publishers and even smaller publishers, mid-sized publishers, who are open to unsolicited manuscripts, unagented manuscripts. And so it's definitely possible for you to get a pub deal with someone that I would also be submitting to. And so those are obviously more attractive to me, because you're going to have more advances. You're going to have more, higher royalties. You're going to have things like that. So yes, I would jump even higher for one of those contracts if someone came to me and said, I have this publishing deal. And that has definitely happened to me. I have signed people who had pub deals, and I have actually rejected people who have had publishing deals who came to me and asked me to represent them.
That would be interesting to know.
Great. Okay, so first, the reason that I have taken on the person is because I went ahead and read the manuscript that has the pub deal, and I loved it, and I read the manuscript that they were going to work on with me next. If it was a picture book, I've read 5 more of their manuscripts, and I think, okay, I really am a great fit for this person, and they have this pub deal. I'm definitely going to offer. But there are also times when I have said, I know you have a pub deal, but I don't think I'm the best agent for you because I've read your next book and it's way too dark for me. Or I have read your next picture books and they're a conflict with another client that I have already. So there are reasons for sure that agents should reject if you have a publishing deal. I will say that there are definitely agents, and I have seen this happen to people who later became my clients, who said yes and then didn't want any of the other manuscripts that the person had. So I think you really, really need to be careful when you're looking for this agent and you have a publishing deal, because you kind of have this over emotional state. Added on to that, you have this feeling like you have a time limit, which you don't really. And you also have so much that you're trying to figure out. So,
Yeah, these are things like we were talking about the next works of the author that you're looking at and things like that. And
right.
when rejection is hard, no matter if it's a champagne rejection, it's still a rejection, right? However,
Absolutely.
a rejection like I can't get this manuscript because I just published one, but I love your writing. Send me something else from an editor. That's still the window is still open. You know what I mean? The door might be closed, but they have opened this window. Same for an agent. Like you might think, well, why can't this agent just sell, another client with humorous picture books? But like in the end, that's going to be a disservice to you as the writer. And I think that's one,
Absolutely.
we have to remember that like we bring as much to the table as agents and editors. They can't do what they do without our work. So I think it's important for us to remember our self-worth, to not get desperate, though it's so hard.
Yes.
Yes. Authors remember that you butter our bread, not the other way around.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
So my devil's advocate question is I've
Yes.
done all the work. I've written, I've queried, I've researched all this. Why would I just hand over 15% of my deal to you when we just met? And maybe not even that. Maybe I just saw your name.
Well,
What is that?
the reason is because there are many actually. One of the main reasons is because I can almost always negotiate more money that will pay for my commission. I can almost not think of a contract except for one with a very small publisher that I was not able to negotiate more money and or higher royalties and or a royalty escalator that was much better for that person. So like an escalator just quickly is, let's say they're giving you a good rate would be 12.5% on, a hardcover up to 10,000 copies. But then after 10,000 copies, maybe you get 13%. And then after 20,000 copies, or 30,000, so you have an escalator that goes up the more copies you sell, which is really good for you. And that's something that I can often negotiate more of. Also, I'm telling you, there are so many little clauses and phrases in contracts that are very difficult to navigate. And just because I do it all the time, I know what to look for. I know what you're going to. I know, Nikki, your uncle was probably wonderful, and I'm glad that you had him. But I can almost guarantee you that I could look at that contract and find things you should have asked for that you didn't.
Absolutely.
And so that's one thing. The other thing is navigating the emotional side of publishing. There are a lot of times that Maybe the editor wants changes that the author doesn't want to do. Or maybe the contract is signed and things aren't going well. I can be a mediator. I can be the bad guy for you. I can be the person who stands up to the editor and says, this is not okay. And, my client needs this. And I can do that and be the bad guy so that you, as the author and the editor, can still have a balmy, wonderful relationship. And, I'm like the mom who doesn't let their kid,
You're cool, Mom.
Well, let's hope so. But anyway, the other thing that I think is that every author needs to be realistic and realize that publishing is so hard that when you get that deal, all you want to do is sign it. And I have sometimes I have just said to my authors, you should not be signing this yet. Like, please let me negotiate another round because you should not be signing this, even though you want to sign it. I had a contract that took me 14 months to negotiate. And the reason it took that long was because I just kept going back and saying, I really don't think that this is good. And there were other things that were taking time too. That wasn't just it. But I was able to keep going back to them and saying, I really think that we should do this. And this is why. So navigating emotionally. And then that is just through the contract. Then after the contract is signed, there are all kinds of things that I do for my clients. Stephanie maybe could tell you more about that, but I'm not even sure I can think of everything I do for my clients.
A lot. But what Heather's saying is important. There's so many things that you don't realize that you need an agent for. And I think that's what we were talking about in the first part of this podcast is you kind of need to have a game plan and know, at least have a good idea of what you want. Mm-hmm. Some people are fantastic about putting out their manuscripts, looking up the information, they want that control over it. Just like people who independently publish really want control over that aspect. But if you are someone who wants to have, more writing time, quite honestly, and have the agent deal with the contract things, just even helping you with publicity, not that they publicize it, but negotiating with your editor and the company about what publicity, what promotions are going to go on. Heather comes in and goes to meetings with me on those kind of things. And quite honestly, you need to have an idea of if you're wanting an agent to help your career, you want a career agent, you need to think about, is this the time? Can I use this? Is this what I want to do? So it's a lot to think about. And I really like that, Heather, you said to, take some time to really figure it out. Because you do need to. If you want an agent, and this is your opportunity to help facilitate that, you should take the opportunity.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I should add is that when you respond, to that editor, and by the way, I'm just giving this advice, but I am not responsible if you go and do this. I will not be responsible for, you saying something to your editor and having it blow up. I'm just offering advice of what I would do. But if you go back to them and just tell them, you're excited, but you need time to think about it and you're going to look over the contract. You don't want to give them a time frame necessarily, but you can ask them if they have a time frame. One thing I would say, though, is if the editor does not want to give you time to go and find an agent, then it is a big red flag, and I would run the other way.
Same thing of when you're looking, if you decide to look for an agent, whether in this scenario or any scenario, if the agent doesn't let you take the time you need, another red flag. Make sure you ask to talk to, I will say one of the things I miss the most about not being agented is the support of when a book is done and it's time to move to the next one, to be able to be like, okay, these are what I have. These I all love, but I don't know which one I want to do first. And to have someone that has a pulse on the market, which changes, right? But like just that someone in your
Absolutely.
corner that doesn't eat unless you succeed. Like, I mean, to be really honest, like it is
The
probably one
business,
of the most pure relationships because there's no way that your agent is not trying to sell for you because that's they don't make money if you don't make
right?
money.
I think I disagree with that just a little bit. And the reason is because I think what happens is agents can take on a lot of clients. And then if they have, let's say, half their clients start becoming very successful,
Mhm.
and then they haven't sold any of your books, they can slack off
That's fair.
on,
That is true.
doing things
That
for
is
you.
fair.
So I think if you are feeling your agent slacking off, that's definitely kind of a sign that you should maybe think about. Yeah.
Absolutely. And again, that right is can be a whole episode
And
which
Heather, I have a question. Going back to, we talked about the two paths. So we kind of talked about the one path of what you would do if you're going to go it on your own with this contract and getting a lawyer, talking to
Mhm.
critique partners, getting all the advice you can, taking a hot second to weigh all your options. What if I decide that this is the time that I want to parlay this into an opportunity to reach out to an agent? What do I say? What email do I send?
Right. So there's a couple ways of going about that. Most agents right now, I think, use Query Manager. If you want to query an agent who's using Query Manager, then what you would do is you would query them and then wait a couple hours. And then you have the ability in Query Manager to do an offer notice to that agent.
Okay.
So you want to send up that flag, hey, like I have an offer. And then in the email, it's a message that you send them through Query Manager. You say, I have an offer of publication. It's a special email that you send, and I don't know what it looks like on the other side. All I know is I get a big orange pop up thing that says, someone has an offer, and I can go to that query. If your agent maybe is using Query Manager, you can do this too, but if your agent is that you want to query is not using Query Manager, then you need to find a way to get their email. I would suggest just paying the $25 monthly fee for Publishers Marketplace and getting the email of that agent and then querying them directly in their email. Even though sometimes agents don't like it when you pop up in their inbox with a query, whenever there's something urgent like this, that's an offer of publication or another offer from another agent, I personally prefer it. I prefer that you pop up in my inbox because then I see it right away. And if you do that and you decide to query them through direct email, in the subject line, you need to say in all caps, offer of publication, and then put your title and your name. And then, put the regular query letter in there with a brief paragraph that says, I have an offer of publication from X publisher, and I would love it if you would represent me.
Mhm.
And it's important to me to know who the publisher is. If you don't tell me, I always ask because, again, it might be a publisher that's actually not to your advantage to pay me
Yeah.
for. But at the same time, maybe it's worth it to you to pay that 15% anyhow to land an agent. So,
Well, and I was going to say one thing too about Publishers Marketplace. You can also use that as a tool to look for editors and publishing houses if you don't want to be agented.
yes.
You can also use it, which is one of my favorite things to do, is if I have a new idea and I do a search on the internet and I'm like, "Ooh, there's not a book out about this." That's rarely the case. So
Yes.
you go in there
Yeah.
and you can put the topic because the book might not be published yet, but it might have already been bought. And so those just are certain things that I can control that help me better
Mhm.
determine what of the things I love, I want to work on next. So there's a lot of reasons Publishers Marketplace is a great tool, no matter which path you're trying to conquer.
Good place to find comp titles
Yes.
too.
Good point. Good point.
Mhm.
Okay, so I have a couple questions on, as an author, why it would seem like I shouldn't query. For instance, I write multiple formats in multiple age groups, and it's a picture book that I have a contract on. Okay. But
Mhm.
I'm also writing a romance novel that's not finished. It's not polished. And so I think to myself, well, if I go and query, the next question, right, that any agent is going to ask is, what else do you have?
Mhm.
Right? And if they don't ask
Mhm.
you that, then they're most likely not a career agent. They're just a book agent. So
Yeah.
Absolutely.
that's also something, like, if they don't care what comes next, and if you just want a book agent, a single book, then that's great. But just these are things, right, that you have to think about. So I guess I'm thinking, well, maybe I shouldn't query, because the agent's going to ask me, well, what do you have next? And I don't have finished, polished product yet. I mean, would you agree that that would be a time that you probably wouldn't want to query? Or am I wrong?
If you want an agent, I would
Okay.
query.
Oh, that's great.
Because all they can say is no.
Right? You don't know.
All they can say is no. And I think that in this industry, I mean, honestly, in every industry, but in this industry especially, if your track and your passion is to become traditionally published with an agent, you have got to take every single advantage. You've got to take every opportunity that you can to get
Mhm.
an agent. And I think that, okay, here's the deal. If, let's say you do have that picture book and that's the one you
Mhm.
sold, but you also have the rest of everything is romance. Number one, I would say you don't have a plan for your career, which is probably something you should get,
Probably.
because in this industry, most of the time you want to be branded.
Mhm.
I mean, that's what sells, is you become a brand.
Mhm.
I mean, Mo Willems is a
Yep.
brand,
Mhm.
and she sells her brand. And like, there are even people who are so branded that they become imprints of their own,
Yeah, that's a good
right?
point.
Like Linda Sue Park has become Alida, for HarperCollins. So I would say, number one, maybe you should rethink your plan. But also, there are agents who take multiple. I mean, I take everything.
Sure.
I know I'm rare. Um, it is rare for someone to take everything, to be so scattered, maybe that they love everything. I don't know.
Some of us like to write a little of everything.
Yeah.
And that is the
Yeah,
plan. Like, for me, I don't want to be pigeonholed. You know what I mean? Personally,
right.
like, I have
Exactly.
pseudonyms that if I ever get published in this, I'm not going to use the same one that my kidlet
Yeah.
is, like, just
Mhm.
because of the drastic
Right.
difference,
Obviously,
right?
yes. You can brand
So
yourself.
yeah, so
Yes.
I mean, those of you out there that are like, oh well, I just don't have one thing. That's not what Heather's saying. It's
Yeah.
just, it's okay if you don't have a plan yet either. Like, that's a journey too, and sometimes that plan switches, right? Like, you're going down the road
Mhm.
and then, oh, detour. Like,
Yeah,
that's why
for
we have a
sure. I mean,
Lots
community,
of
right?
detours.
I was going to say that's the whole premise of this
Right.
podcast, is that you can change what you're doing. You can at any moment pivot. You can decide this isn't working and my goals have
Mhm.
changed. And that's totally fine. Yeah. And I was just saying, if you do want to be a traditionally published author and you don't have a game plan for what you're going to do, then you might want to get one. But I think it's totally fine to have an author who, and I actually represent several, who write picture books and adult, or who write middle grade and adult, or who write everything. I mean, I have a couple of authors who write everything. And that's how you do it. You just brand yourself with different pen names and off you go. And that's totally fine. But again, if that is your goal, then the list of agents that you really want to query, right, they're going to be different. And so for me, it goes back to that game plan. Like,
Mhm.
If you are querying small publishers or you're querying publishers who are open like Berkeley and Harlequin and Delacorte Press, then in my opinion, you should have a plan for when that deal comes in. These are the editors that I want to query. And these are the people I know are going to be good fits for me because you've already figured out where you're going, right? And you know, these are the agents that are going to fit my career.
Yeah, I totally
So.
agree, Heather. I think that we keep coming back to that, having a plan, but it seems hard because this feels like a very capricious industry where things are changing and you don't quite know what's going on behind the scenes all the time. And Nikki, you said this too, control the things that you can control. Have a plan in place.
Right.
And I personally think it's fine to sub to both agents and editors at the same time if you're unagented, because you're going to pursue every path you can in order to get where you want to go. And it's exciting that that's the possibility that you can get a contract without an agent. I've gotten contracts without agents. I know Nikki has too. So it does happen. And you just need to be prepared as to what's your next step and what do you really want. And hopefully we can answer some of those questions for people who are in that wonderful position of having an offer on your plate.
It's what we all want.
Don't we, though? More of them all the time. Nikki, do you have any other devil's advocate questions for us?
Man, I see both. And if you're not in this situation right at this moment, start thinking, in what situations would you want an agent or don't want an agent? Or who would your dream agent be? What would be the characteristics of that agent? What things are you willing to negotiate or give up? And what things are you not willing to, And again, this goes back to being the butter on the bread. Like, what is it that you want, and having that confidence, and that takes time, right? And it also feels like it can be stolen from you, and you know what I mean, when things happen. And again, that's why like community is just huge.
It is.
But if you're in this situation right now and you're like, I don't have time for a game plan, like, you can still have a game plan right now. Just remember that they have a manuscript that they want to buy, and they want to print, and they want to sell. And don't forget that asking for time is a good thing, and it should be granted in both directions, right? It's a big choice. We hope that you all have found this helpful. Let us know. We love when people are like, ooh, can we hear about this topic? Because that's what we want to do. And we want to hear from you all too, because we all have different experiences, which makes this whole journey much more fun.
And if you have follow-up questions, please feel free to ask us either on social media or through our email.
And congratulations on just getting a game plan or getting a contract and whatever you decide to do. So thanks for joining us on Wayward Writers. Conquer Your Path.